Microsoft released a survey last week asking Xbox users if they were aware of features from the PlayStation controller, which is called the DualSense, and if they would like those features inside the Series X controller. One of the biggest features that's talked about from the DualSense is the adaptive triggers, which basically changes the resistance of the controller depending on what's happening in the game. It's kind of hard to describe if you haven't actually touched it. And so I ask you, Xbox fans, would you want DualSense-like features inside your Xbox controller? I'm going to say Microsoft should add it. And it's really strictly from a business reason, because you guys decide, we decide whether or not Microsoft should add it or not if they're asking us. But Microsoft needs to stay as competitive as possible with Sony. Sony's already got, historically, the better catalog of exclusive games on the PlayStation. Microsoft is trying to change that. They obviously bought Bethesda. They bought a bevy of studios to try to add more exclusive games to the console, but we haven't seen that yet. And so if people are able to say, well, Sony's got this and the features of the DualSense controller, well, that's from a business perspective. You just don't want people to be able to say that about you, which could possibly lead more people to buy the PlayStation. So strictly from a business perspective, yeah, Microsoft should add it. Now, if you're into the idea, if you were filling out the survey and you wanted these DualSense features included in the Series X controller, are you willing to pay for it? Because you're going to pay for it in some way. You're either going to pay for it in battery life or you're going to pay for it in cost. The Series X controller, the new one, right now is $60. The DualSense right now is $70. And so if Microsoft ends up adding these features, then something's going to give. Probably battery life will decrease. More consumption will increase. But if they decide to increase the price because of these added features too, well, now you're paying for that. Now, here's the thing. If you don't want these features included, well, then Microsoft, if they were to do that, there's no incentive for you to buy it, right? So now they've increased the price of these controllers for features that you don't even want. And so if you don't want those features, how is Microsoft supposed to compete from a business perspective? If you are rooting for Microsoft to do well this particular generation, well, they have to be able to compete with the business practices that Sony is putting out. So how are they going to do that if they still don't have the features that the DualSense has? Well, it goes back to the fundamentals, right? Exclusive games, okay? They're working on that. They got the studios. Now they actually have to put the games out. They have to stick to what their fans want, to stick with what you want, because if they do end up adding a feature from the DualSense, then yes, of course, you're going to be less likely to buy a more expensive controller unless you just absolutely have to. Plus, there's Game Pass. They're killing it with Game Pass. So whatever Microsoft is doing with that, just keep on going. That's about the only way they could compete. Now, the real question is, will these features be ultimately used? If developers don't use the features in the DualSense, that kind of sucks for PlayStation 5 users because you're paying for something that's not getting any significant use, if any use at all. But I'll say this, if Microsoft ends up adapting those DualSense features, then it actually might work out better for PlayStation users because more developers might be inclined to include those features because more than one console is going to use it. So let's say, I don't know, Battlefield, whatever. Let's just say Battlefield has some features that they want to include with the DualSense. Well, they're probably going to be less likely to include that depending on how difficult it's going to be to include those features in the first place. But if they have two controllers that do it, obviously depending on the coding architecture, I imagine, it could increase the likelihood that those features get more usage and more creative thought put into how they're used. That's the important part. Not just including something, oh yeah, I pulled the trigger. This gun triggers harder to pull than the other trigger. Nah, it's not something like that. Something more meaningful, something I wouldn't know what that would look like. That's their job, not ours. So if they can do that, then that would be great. But yes, at the end of the day, I do think Microsoft should do it. if that's what the Xbox fans want. And if it is what the fans want, then everybody wins. The question is, are you willing to pay for more battery and a higher cost? So, again, I ask, do you want DualSense features in the new Xbox controllers? Talk about what you're thinking in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please tap the like button. We also have a ton of videos on new games uploaded nearly every day, so subscribe to keep up with whatever's posted here. Thank you for watching. I'll talk to you later.